You know, there are moments in life when you're tested, not by fate, not by accident, but by the sheer entitlement of people who believe the world owes them something. And in my case, that test came not from a stranger, not from a random person off the street, but from my own neighbor, the one we all quietly refer to as HOA Karen. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you probably already know the type. She's the one who believes she's the president of everyone's business. She polices lawns like it's a military mission, complains about the color of mailboxes, and treats the rules not as guidelines, but as weapons she can swing around to make herself feel powerful. But her behavior that day wasn't just about nitpicking or nagging, it was about crossing the line between arrogance and outright absurdity. And it all started when her grown son, a man who should have known better, lost control of his car and plowed straight into my fence. Now, let me stop right there. Imagine you're sitting at home, enjoying a normal evening, when suddenly there's a loud crash outside your house. You rush out, and what do you see? Not a fallen tree, not a random accident, but your neighbor's son standing there sheepishly next to a car that's just wrecked your property. You'd think the bare minimum would be an apology, right? A simple, "I'm so sorry, let me take care of this." But no. What I got instead was a level of entitlement so jaw-dropping that even the police officers who showed up couldn't believe their ears. Because the first words out of Karen's son's mouth weren't an apology. They weren't even an admission of fault. No. He looked me straight in the eye, with his mother standing right behind him egging him on, and said that I should pay for the damage. According to him, my fence was the problem. Yes, you heard that right. The same fence that had been standing in the same spot for years, maintained properly, inspected, approved by the city. Suddenly, it was a hazard, and apparently his crashing into it was somehow my fault. And just when I thought the absurdity had peaked, it got worse. Karen, in her usual self-righteous tone, immediately called the cops, not to report the accident, not to admit what happened, but to try and spin the story in her favor. She told them I had put up a dangerous obstruction, and that her son was the real victim. Now, I'll be honest. In that moment, I thought to myself, this has to be one of those situations where reality feels like satire. Because who, in their right mind, crashes into someone else's fence, and then claims the homeowner is responsible? But when the officers arrived, the look on their faces as they listened to Karen and her son was priceless. You could see the disbelief, the barely hidden smirk, as they realized what kind of nonsense they were dealing with. And what happened next? Well, let's just say that by the end of that night, it wasn't my wallet that took the hit. It wasn't my fence that was blamed. No, the officers made sure justice was served. And Karen's son, instead of walking away with some false sense of victory, he ended up watching as his car got hooked up to a tow truck and hauled away. But the road to that satisfying ending wasn't smooth. Oh no, it was filled with arguments, accusations, and a whole lot of audacity from Karen and her son. So, let me take you through exactly how it all went down. It began around 7 p.m. on a quiet evening. I was inside, just finishing dinner, when I heard this loud crash that shook me out of my chair. At first, I thought it might have been an accident on the main road. But as I rushed outside, I saw the real damage. My fence had been smashed in, wood splintered everywhere, and sitting right there against it was Karen's son's car. He was standing next to it, phone in hand, acting like nothing serious had happened. The first words out of his mouth were, "You're gonna have to pay for this." I stood there, stunned. "Excuse me? I have to pay." He gestured at the fence like it was the problem. "Yeah, man. You put this thing too close to the road. My mom always said it was dangerous. If it wasn't here, I wouldn't have hit it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my property, legally built, approved, and in the same place for years. But before I could respond, his mother, Karen herself, came marching out of her house like she'd been rehearsing for this exact moment. She immediately started yelling. "This is exactly what I've been saying. That fence is an eyesore and a hazard. You should have taken it down years ago. Now look what you've done to my son's car." I blinked at her in disbelief. "What I've done? Your son drove straight into my fence." But she wasn't listening. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and with all the confidence in the world told the police that her son had been the victim of an unsafe structure. When the cops arrived, Karen put on her best performance. She exaggerated every word, painting a picture of me as some reckless homeowner who had endangered the neighborhood. Her son backed her up, nodding along, acting like he'd been wronged. The officers turned to me for my side. I calmly explained. The fence was approved by the HOA itself years ago. It was well within property lines, and I had the paperwork to prove it. I pointed out the skid marks on the road, clear evidence that her son had lost control of his car. The officers examined the scene, took notes, and then asked Karen and her son to explain again. This time, their story started crumbling. The more details they gave, the more ridiculous it sounded. Finally, one officer said, "Ma'am, your son hit a stationary fence on private property. That's not the homeowner's fault." Karen's face went red. She tried to argue, but the officer cut her off. "Your son is responsible for the damages to this property. And since the car is not drivable, we're calling a tow." That's when the reality hit them. Karen's son started panicking, begging them not to tow it. Karen shouted that this was harassment and threatened to file complaints. But none of it worked. The tow truck came, hooked up the car, and drove off. Standing there, watching their expressions change from smugness to sheer defeat, I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief. For once, their entitlement had backfired spectacularly. After the officers left, I documented everything, filed a claim for the fence repair, and within weeks, their insurance covered it. Karen never apologized, of course, but the silence from her after that incident was worth more than any apology. Because in that moment, she realized something. Not even her constant meddling or her misplaced sense of authority could twist the truth. Her son had been reckless, and they both had to face the consequences. And me! I got my fence fixed, my peace of mind restored, and a story that still makes me shake my head whenever I think about it.